He stood on my porch with his wife and 3 heavy suitcases, saying, "We're moving in, Mama. You've got enough space for us now." 13 years of silence had turned his voice into a stranger's, but my heart still flinched at the sound of it. I smiled, stepped aside, and thought, this time, I'll finally do what I should have done years ago. It was a Sunday morning, the kind that used to feel holy, even if I hadn't been to church in years. The sun had just started spilling through my kitchen window, lighting up the steam from my coffee like little ghosts rising. I was alone, same as always. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Slow, steady, almost gentle. Then came the knock. A knock that didn't belong to this house anymore. When I opened the door, I froze. There he was. My son, Marcus. 13 years older, though not much wiser by the look of him. His hairline had started to run away, but that arrogant tilt in his chin was still there, same as the last time he'd shouted, "I don't need you," before slamming the door behind him. Beside him stood a woman, pretty, young, with eyes that darted around like she was checking the place for treasure. Her perfume hit before her smile did. He didn't say hello, didn't say, "Mama, I missed you." Just, "We're moving in." And behind him, 3 suitcases stood like silent witnesses to his audacity. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard right. My fingers gripped the doorknob tighter. "We?" I asked, my voice calm, even though my chest had started to ache. He gestured toward the woman beside him. "This is Sierra, my wife. We've been staying in a motel for a while, but, you know," he looked past me into the living room. "You've got all this space. It only makes sense." My first instinct was to laugh, the kind of laugh that comes when you've been slapped by the absurd. But the years had taught me to keep my face steady. "And what makes you think I'd let you just move in here?" He shrugged, like a spoiled boy. "Because I'm your son. And I heard about your money, Mama. You don't gotta act like it's not true. Everyone in town's been talking. You hit big after that lawsuit, didn't you?" Sierra gave a polite little cough, then smiled. "We thought it'd be nice, you know, to reconnect. Family's all we got, right? Family." That word hit like glass in my throat. 13 years. 13 birthdays missed. 13 Christmases with one empty chair. Not a phone call when my hip gave out. Not a text when I buried my sister. Just silence. Now here he was, talking about family, talking about space, talking about what I owed him. I stepped aside, not out of weakness, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He walked right in, like he'd never left. His wife trailed behind, pulling her luggage, her heels clicking against my hardwood floors. He looked around, whistling low. "Nice place, Mama. You really did well for yourself." My hands trembled, but I hid them behind my back. "I did," I said softly. "I learned how to live without waiting on anyone's approval." He didn't hear the warning in my tone. Or maybe he did, and didn't care. He wandered toward the kitchen, opening cabinets, peeking into the fridge like a man inspecting property he'd just inherited. "I knew you'd come around one day," he said, his voice casual. "You always used to say, blood is blood. So yeah, we're gonna stay for a bit, until we figure things out. You've got plenty of room anyway." I looked at him for a long time. Really looked. And for the first time in years, I didn't see my boy. I saw a stranger with my eyes, wearing a smile that had forgotten how to mean love. Sierra was standing by the window, pretending to admire the garden. "It's such a blessing," she said, "to have a mother-in-law so generous." I almost smiled at that. Generous? Yes. I had been generous all my life. With my money, my time, my forgiveness. I'd given until I was empty. And the one person I'd given the most to was now standing in my home, ready to take more. I walked over to the dining table and ran my fingers across its polished surface. The same table where Marcus once did his homework, where we used to eat pancakes on Saturdays, where I once prayed for him to come home safe. Well, he was home now, but not in the way I'd prayed for. I'll make some coffee, I said quietly. You two must be tired. Sierra smiled wide, relieved. Marcus nodded, triumphant, like he'd already won whatever battle he thought he was fighting. I turned toward the kitchen, my face calm, my steps slow. Inside, though, something old and cold began to stir. As the kettle hissed, I looked out the window at my quiet yard, at the life I'd built in peace after years of heartbreak. And in that reflection, framed by sunlight and steam, I realized this wasn't the reunion he thought it was. This was the beginning of an ending. The sound of the kettle boiling took me back, not to a kitchen, but to a memory, to a night when I stood in this same spot, watching steam rise as I waited for a son who never came home. I remember that night clearly. Marcus was 21, angry, and full of the kind of pride only youth can afford. He'd fallen in with a woman then, not Sierra, another one. Wild, reckless, always whispering that I was holding him back. I tried to warn him, but every word I spoke turned into a spark in his temper. When he stormed out that last night, I thought he'd cool off and come back. Instead, he vanished. Days turned into months, months into years. I called, wrote letters, even went to the old apartment he shared with her. Nothing. Once, a neighbor told me they'd packed up overnight. Said they were done with this town, she said. I didn't know it then, but that goodbye had already been written the day he left. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too strict. Maybe I worked too much, or loved too hard. When his father died, when cancer took him and left us both hollow, I tried to be both parents, both strength and softness. I worked double shifts at the diner, scrubbed other people's floors on weekends, saved every dime for his college fund. But none of that mattered. To Marcus, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a reminder of everything he wanted to escape. The first few years were the hardest. Every ring of the phone twisted my gut with hope. Every knock on the door made me stand up too fast. And every time it wasn't him, I told myself I was fine. Until one day, I actually was. Not happy, but fine. I learned the quiet kind of peace, the one that comes after you've cried yourself empty. I got older. I grew softer in some ways, harder in others. I found new routines, tending my little garden, selling my baked pies at the market, walking down to the pier on Sundays to watch the waves crash. The world moved on, and so did I. Then came the accident. It was 2014, I think. A delivery truck ran a red light and tore through my car like it was paper. I woke up in the hospital with 2 broken ribs, a fractured leg, and a lawyer telling me I had a case. I didn't want to sue anyone. I just wanted to go home. But he said, "Mom, they nearly killed you. You deserve justice." And justice came, slow, cold, and unexpected. A year later, I received a settlement that turned my world upside down. I wasn't rich, but in this town, $1 million is enough to make folks see you differently. I used it wisely, paid off the house, fixed the roof, built a small bakery downtown, something I'd dreamed of since I was young. And for the first time in my life, I felt safe. Not because of the money, but because I'd learned to stand without anyone else holding me up. The people around town talked. You can't hide success in a place this small. I ignored the whispers, until the day I heard his name. Someone at the bakery counter, a woman I barely knew, said, "You know, your boy Marcus was asking around about you. Said he heard you came into money. Looks like he wants to make amends." She laughed when she said it, but my chest tightened anyway. That was 6 months ago. And now here he was, at my door, with his wife and luggage, as if time had forgiven him on my behalf. As the kettle whistled, I poured the boiling water into the pot and took a deep breath. I could hear them in the living room, Marcus's low voice, Sierra's high laugh. The sound of them together felt foreign, like strangers making themselves at home in a memory that wasn't theirs. "Smells good, Mama," he called. "Got any of those biscuits you used to make?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I took 2 cups of coffee and carried them out, my hands steady now. Sierra smiled, pretending warmth. "This house feels so cozy," she said, eyes roaming across the shelves lined with framed photos. Photos that stopped featuring Marcus after he left. Her gaze landed on one. It was a picture of him at 18, wearing his graduation cap, me standing beside him with my hand on his shoulder. He looked embarrassed even then. I was too proud for both of us. "You still keep that?" Marcus asked, sounding almost amused. "Some things remind me of who I used to be," I said quietly. "And who's that?" he asked, leaning back with that smirk that used to charm everyone except the people he hurt. I met his eyes. "Someone who doesn't beg to be loved anymore." He blinked, just a flicker, but I saw it. A crack in his confidence. Then he laughed it off. "Well, you won't have to beg for company now. You've got us." Sierra squeezed his hand and smiled like a woman proud of her man for being so clever. I smiled back too. Not because I was fooled, but because I finally understood what was happening. They weren't here for love. They were here for opportunity. And in that moment, as sunlight poured through the window and glinted off my coffee cup, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not be fooled again. This time, it would be my turn to teach a lesson. By evening, they'd already made themselves comfortable, as if they'd been here forever. Marcus's shoes were off, his feet propped on my coffee table, the same one I bought second-hand after my accident. Sierra was in my kitchen, rearranging my spices like she was auditioning for a homemaker's role she didn't deserve. I stood by the doorway and watched the two of them move through my house like ghosts reclaiming the rooms they once haunted. It was strange, seeing them there, smelling her floral perfume, mixing with the faint lemon scent I used to clean the counters that morning. The whole place felt smaller, like my piece was being folded in half. "Marcus," I said finally, "you planning to stay long?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "Just until we get settled. We've had a rough year. You'll understand." I crossed my arms. "That's not an answer." He sighed like I was nagging him. "Mama, come on. Don't start. I told you. It's temporary." Sierra turned, holding one of my teacups like it was her own. "We don't want to be a burden," she said sweetly. "But times are hard, you know. Rent, bills, groceries. Everything's gone up. You're lucky you bought this house when you did." I felt my jaw tighten. Luck had nothing to do with it. I worked for this. That silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. They didn't come here for reconciliation. They came because they thought I was easy. The same woman who'd once loaned money without question, who'd forgiven before apologies were ever spoken. Marcus looked around, his eyes settling on the framed pictures on the wall. Not of him, but of my bakery, my friends, the life I'd built after he left. He frowned. "So you really been doing all this on your own?" "Yes." "No help?" I smiled faintly. "No help." He nodded slowly, then said, "You could have called me." That one almost made me laugh. "I did call you, Marcus," I said softly. "Dozens of times. You just stopped picking up." He shifted, his discomfort flickering through that easy arrogance he wore like armor. "You know how life gets, Mama. People get busy." 13 years of busy? I asked. His face hardened. "Why you always got to turn everything into guilt?" I came back, didn't I? There it was. The twist of his logic. The kind that makes the sinner feel like the savior. Sierra came over, laying a manicured hand on his shoulder. "He's trying, Mrs. Jenkins." That's what matters. The way she said Mrs. Jenkins, polite, distant, made me realize she didn't see me as family at all. Just an obstacle to get past. I took a slow breath. "You're right," I said. "Trying matters." Then I tilted my head. "What exactly are you trying for?" Her eyes flickered. Marcus jumped in before she could answer. "We're building something new, Mama. We just need a little help getting started." "Help?" I asked. "Just till I find a steady job again," he said. "And maybe we could use the guest room for a while. You don't even use it. And when will you leave?" "When things settle." "How long will that take?" He shrugged. You act like we're strangers. I looked at him quietly for a moment. Then I said, You are. The room went still. Even Sierra stopped smiling. Marcus laughed, sharp, defensive. Come on, you don't mean that. I do. You're my mother? I was, I said, until you decided I wasn't enough for the kind of man you wanted to be. He stood, his voice rising. So that's what this is about? You still mad I left? You should be happy I came back. Happy. That word hit me like insult and irony in one. I met his gaze, calm and unblinking. Marcus, I made peace with your absence. What I'm not going to make peace with is disrespect in my own home. His wife stepped in, voice dripping honey. He didn't mean any disrespect. He's just tired. We both are. You know how men get when life hits them hard. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, dear. I don't. The men I've known didn't come home only when there was something to take. Sierra blinked, not used to pushback. Marcus rubbed his temple, sighing dramatically. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Am I? I asked quietly. Or are you realizing this house doesn't open to every knock anymore? For the first time, neither of them had a quick answer. I turned toward the kitchen, my voice steady. I'll fix dinner. We'll talk later. As I walked away, I heard Sierra whisper, She's testing us. Marcus muttered, She'll come around. She always does, I smiled to myself, hidden by the walls. No, son, not this time. While the food cooked, I stood by the window, watching the reflection of my own face in the glass. Older, lined, but not weak. 13 years had taught me something. Silence can turn into steel, and the woman who once begged for love no longer needed it to survive. I glanced at the clock. The hands ticked steady. I could hear their murmurs in the living room. Plotting, maybe, or pretending not to. It didn't matter. They thought I was the same mother they left behind. But they were about to meet the woman I became in their absence. The next few days passed like a strange dream. Marcus and Sierra made themselves at home with a confidence that came from assumption, not invitation. By the second morning, Marcus had claimed the guest room. By the third, Sierra was reorganizing my pantry like she paid the mortgage. I watched quietly. From the corner of my own kitchen, from behind the rim of my coffee cup, learning the rhythm of their entitlement. They didn't see me watching. They never did. People like them rarely look at the ones they underestimate. Marcus would spend hours on his phone, voice low, whispering to someone I didn't know. I caught words like loan, interest, and once, she won't notice. Sierra, meanwhile, made calls in the backyard. Always cheerful, always fake. But it wasn't the fake cheer that caught my attention. It was her use of my name. She's loaded, I heard her say one afternoon, laughing softly. Yeah, the lawsuit. She's playing humble, but she's got more than she lets on. I didn't move, didn't interrupt. I let her words hang in the air like smoke, thin, poisonous, revealing. That evening, I found an envelope on my dining table. My name written in Marcus's handwriting. Inside, a folded piece of paper, a proposal, as he'd titled it. He wanted to start a family business. He'd even drawn a logo, Jenkins Auto and Wash. He wanted $85,000 to get things running. He wrote, You always told me to be ambitious, Mama. This is your chance to support that. Support. That word made my stomach turn. Support had cost me everything once. My youth, my health, my savings, my peace. When he walked in later, all smiles and ease, I was sitting at the table with the paper in front of me. You found it, he said. I was going to talk to you about that later. I bet you were, I said softly. He sat across from me. Look, Mama, I know it sounds like a lot, but it's an investment. You'd be helping your own blood. I'll pay you back once things take off. And what happens if it doesn't? He blinked. What if it doesn't take off? What happens to my money then? He frowned. Why are you being so negative? I'm trying to build something here, for both of us. Don't you want to see your son succeed? The way he said it, Don't you want to see your son succeed? Twisted my insides. It wasn't a question. It was a guilt trap. He still thought I was that same woman who'd bend under love. I folded the paper neatly and slid it back toward him. I'll think about it, I said. Really? His face brightened. Yes, I lied. Later that night, after they went to bed, I sat in the living room, alone with the low hum of the refrigerator and my own thoughts. My instincts screamed that this was more than just greed. It was desperation. So I did what mothers do best. I investigated quietly. In the morning, I asked Sierra if she needed anything from the store. She smiled, that practiced, grateful smile. Oh no, thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. We're fine. But as I walked past their bedroom, I saw the corner of a paper sticking out from Marcus's duffel bag. It wasn't the business proposal. It was a document. Bank letterhead. I hesitated only a second before pulling it free. And there it was. His secret, printed in black and white. Notice of foreclosure. Final demand. The apartment he'd been living in was being repossessed. He was 6 months behind on payments. Worse yet, there was a second notice. A loan default from a private lender. My hands went cold. The dates lined up. He hadn't come to reconnect. He'd come to collect. Later, I slipped the letters back and stepped outside to breathe. The wind carried the faint smell of honeysuckle, sweet and sharp, like the irony of my life. 13 years he stayed away, and now he returned only because he was drowning, and he thought I'd hand him a lifeboat. That night at dinner, I tested him. So, this business idea, I said casually, spooning stew into my bowl. You said it's a partnership? He grinned. Of course. You'd be the investor. I'd handle the operations, and Sierra? She'd help with admin stuff. She's got a great head for numbers. Sierra looked up quickly, eyes flickering like she'd been caught. Yeah, totally. Numbers, I smiled. I'm sure you do. I watched them eat. Marcus chewing confidently, Sierra nervously picking at her bread. Every bite they took felt symbolic, feeding on what they believed they already owned. After dinner, I said, You two go ahead and rest. I'll clean up. They didn't argue. They never offered to help. When the dishes were done, I sat again at that table, the same table where I'd once prayed for my son's safety, then later for my own peace. I thought about all the years I'd spent working, healing, forgiving. And I realized something sharp and painful. He hadn't just come for money. He'd come to see if I was still the same woman, the one who'd always say yes, even when it hurt. I looked around my quiet home, the walls lined with photos of my new life friends, neighbors, smiling faces from my bakery, and I whispered to myself, he's about to learn who his mother really is. Upstairs, I heard their laughter, muffled, careless, cruel, and in that moment, my sadness burned away. What replaced it was something colder, steadier, and far more dangerous. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I simply began to plan. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too still, too full of ghosts, not the kind that rattle chains, but the kind that wear your son's face and call you Mama after years of silence. I sat in my armchair wrapped in my old knitted shawl, watching the light from the hallway spill across the floor. The air smelled faintly of dish soap and deceit. Every tick of the clock reminded me that they were upstairs, sleeping in comfort that wasn't theirs, under a roof built on my pain. Once upon a time I would have cried, but age does something to a woman's tears, it teaches them discipline. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. I started with what I knew. Marcus was broke. His debts were chasing him. He came here because he believed I was an easy mark, an old woman too sentimental to say no. But what he didn't know was that I'd spent the last 13 years becoming something else entirely. When you've lived through loneliness long enough, you learn the quiet power of preparation. I'd learned how to read contracts, manage my own accounts, and handle every legal paper that came with the bakery. I'd even taken a few courses at the community centre about estate planning and small business law, mostly to protect myself. Now it looked like all that learning was about to pay off. Before sunrise, I opened the cabinet under the desk in my study and pulled out my lockbox, a sturdy metal thing with a little combination dial. Inside were the pieces of my rebuilt life: property deed, bank certificates, bakery ownership papers, and one thin manila envelope marked Will Draft 2. I smiled when I saw it. Marcus didn't know that everything I owned had been quietly transferred into a trust one with strict terms. If anyone tried to claim my estate while I was alive or incapacitated, it would trigger an automatic investigation and freeze. The bakery was owned under an LLC, not my personal name. Even this house was secured. They thought I was vulnerable because of my age. They had no idea I'd armored every inch of my life in plain sight. By morning, the plan was simple. Let them believe they'd won. Feed their confidence. Then turn it all back on them legally, publicly, and permanently. At breakfast, I played the part of the softened mother. "Marcus," I said, setting his coffee down, "I've been thinking about your proposal." His eyes lit up. "Yeah? I want to see how serious you are," I said. "Why don't you draw up a proper business plan? Costs, profit estimates, everything." He smirked. "You mean like a pitch?" "Exactly," I said. "If you can show me you're responsible, we'll move forward." Sierra clapped her hands, beaming. "See? I told you she'd come around." I smiled too, a smile that reached nowhere near my eyes. They spent the next 2 days drafting their business plan. I pretended not to notice that Marcus was copying phrases straight from Google templates and that Sierra was more interested in my jewelry box than QuickBooks. I gave them space. I made cookies. I hummed. Let them think the mother was soft again. On the third night, I made a call to Carla, my friend and attorney. Carla was 10 years younger than me, sharp as a blade, and had been with me since my accident. We'd shared wine, secrets, and once, heartbreak over our ungrateful children. "Carla," I said softly over the phone, "I might need to update my will again." Her tone shifted. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said. "I just want to make sure that if anything happens to me, or if certain people try to take advantage, the law knows who's who." She chuckled. "You sound like you're about to teach someone a lesson." I smiled into the receiver. "Maybe I am. Want me to come by?" "Not yet. Let me give them enough rope first." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the loud kind that comes with shouting or threats, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing the truth before anyone else does. That evening, I set a small stage. I invited a few neighbors for tea, just casual talk, laughter, warmth. I made sure Marcus and Sierra were present. Everyone in this town loves a good story, and I let a few details slip just enough to let it travel. "Oh, the bakery's done so well," I told my friend Miss Ellen. "Carla says I might even open a second branch in the city." Marcus's head snapped up at that. I smiled sweetly. Let him stew in the illusion of endless wealth. Later that night, I overheard him whispering to Sierra in the hallway. "She's got more money than I thought. Maybe we should get her to sign something before she changes her mind." Sierra's voice was lower, colder. "You better hurry. Old people get unpredictable." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, their voices fading into the hum of the night. Every word was fuel. Every lie was a confirmation. The next morning, I put the kettle on and hummed an old gospel tune. When Marcus came into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, I said, "I spoke to Carla. She's coming by tomorrow. She handles all my finances just to make sure everything's clean and fair." He froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a smile. "That's great, Mama. We love transparency." "Good," I said softly. "So do I." He didn't realize what I was doing, not yet. But the board was set. And this time, I wasn't playing mother. I was playing chess. Carla arrived the next afternoon, sharp navy suit, dark red lipstick, and that air of calm authority that always made people sit up straighter. I met her at the door with a warm smile and 2 cups of coffee. "Right on time," I said. She smiled back. I figured this meeting would be worth dressing for. Marcus and Sierra were already in the living room, pretending to scroll through their phones, but clearly curious. When Carla walked in, they both stiffened, instinctively uneasy around anyone who looked like they knew what they were doing. "This is my attorney," I said lightly. "She helps me with all my business and estate matters." Sierra's smile faltered. "Oh, I didn't realize you needed a lawyer for family discussions." "Oh, I don't," I said, still smiling. "But when money's involved, I prefer everything in writing." Marcus laughed too loudly. "Mama, you make it sound like we're trying to rob you." I met his eyes. "Aren't you?" The room went still for half a second. That tight, fragile silence, right before truth cracks the air open. Marcus forced a grin, pretending to take it as a joke. "You're funny. Really." Carla set her briefcase down on the table, flipping it open with a practiced hand. "Mrs. Jenkins told me you were interested in a business arrangement," she said. "Do you have your proposal ready?" Marcus hesitated, then pulled a folder from the coffee table. "Yeah, it's all there. Just a simple investment plan. We'd handle the labor. She'd get a return." Carla skimmed it, her expression unreadable. "And you're offering equity?" "Sure," he said, uncertain. "We can figure that out later." She smiled politely. "That's not how business works, Mr. Jenkins." I sat quietly, watching them sweat under the surface of their charm. Sierra crossed and uncrossed her legs, her painted nails tapping on the armrest. Carla closed the folder and looked at me. "I'll be honest, Mrs. Jenkins, this reads more like a personal loan than an investment. And with his credit history—" Marcus stiffened. "My what?" She didn't miss a beat. "Your credit history. Foreclosure, defaulted private loan. Those things don't vanish easily." He turned to me, face paling. "You went through my stuff?" I met his glare without flinching. "I went through my house, and you left your mess in it." Sierra's voice cracked the silence. "You had no right." "I have every right," I said softly. "This is my home. You brought your lies under my roof. I just turned on the lights." Carla leaned back, watching. She knew better than to interrupt a reckoning. Marcus's voice dropped low. "You don't understand, Mama. I was in trouble. I just needed a little help to get back on my feet. You've got so much." I cut him off. "I have enough. Enough to live, enough to breathe, enough to never depend on anyone again. But not enough to feed a grown man's greed." He stared at me, his pride crumbling. "I'm your son." "Yes," I said. "And I was your mother when you let me be." For a long moment, no one spoke. The house itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Carla cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Jenkins, would you like me to explain how your estate is structured? It might clear up any misunderstandings." "Yes," I said. "Please do." She opened her folder and laid out a single sheet of paper. "This home, as well as the bakery and all liquid assets, are held under a living trust," she explained calmly. "That means Mrs. Jenkins cannot be coerced, tricked, or guilted into transferring ownership. Any attempt to do so, verbal, written, or otherwise, is legally considered exploitation of a senior." Her tone sharpened, just slightly. "That's a felony." Sierra's mouth opened, then closed. Marcus's hands curled into fists on his knees. "You're saying she can't even help her own family?" he snapped. "She can," Carla said smoothly. "But she chooses not to, and the law protects her right to that choice." I sat back, feeling the power in stillness. For once, I didn't have to shout to be heard. The law and truth were doing it for me. Sierra grabbed her purse, her voice shaky. "We didn't come here for trouble. We just wanted to reconnect." I nodded. "Then maybe you should start by apologizing, not calculating." Marcus stood up, towering over me, eyes glassy with frustration. "You don't mean this. You're angry right now. I'm your son." I looked up at him, the same boy I once rocked to sleep, the same boy I'd begged God to protect. "You stopped being my son the day you sold your loyalty for convenience," I said quietly, "and you walked out long before you ever came back." He took a step back, stunned into silence. Sierra tugged at his arm. "Let's go." He hesitated. Pride still wrestling with defeat, then turned and walked out. The door slammed behind them, rattling the picture frames, but not me. Carla exhaled softly. You handled that beautifully. I smiled faintly. I learned that quiet women aren't weak, we're just patient. We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee that had gone cold. Through the window, I watched Marcus and Sierra load their suitcases into their car. They didn't look back. Good. Let them keep driving. Before she left, Carla put her hand on mine. You know he'll come around again someday. They always do when the money runs out. I nodded. Then I'll be right here behind a locked door. When the house fell silent again, I walked to the doorway where they'd stood just days ago. The light hit the empty space where their luggage had been, and I felt the strangest thing. Not sadness, not victory, but relief. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, you survived. The house felt different after they left, lighter, quieter, honest. For days, I moved through the rooms like a woman relearning her own space. The air smelled of lavender and freedom. The silence, once a wound, had turned into peace. I thought I'd feel broken when that door closed behind Marcus. Instead, I felt balanced. For years, I'd believed peace meant forgiving others. But sometimes peace means forgiving yourself for giving too much, for waiting too long, for mistaking love for loyalty. The next morning, I opened my bakery early. The scent of sugar and butter filled the air. My girls smiled and asked how my weekend had been. Quiet, I said, and that word tasted sweeter than any pie I'd ever made. Around noon, a small brown envelope appeared on the counter. My name, Mama, written across it in Marcus's old handwriting. I froze for a long moment before opening it. Inside was one sentence. I didn't come for love, but I left learning it. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into my pocket. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I just whispered, good. That night, I brewed coffee, wrapped myself in my shawl, and sat by the window. The sky was the color of forgiveness. Soft, faded, familiar. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not even at myself. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean opening your door again. Sometimes it just means you're done waiting by it. I went for a walk the next morning, down to the pier where I used to sit alone years ago, praying for my son to call. The water shimmered under the sunlight, calm and unbothered, like time itself had healed with me. I brought out a piece of paper and wrote a short letter, not to Marcus, but to myself. You did it. You stopped apologizing for surviving. You stopped waiting for permission to rest. You gave enough, and then learned to keep something for yourself. I folded the letter, smiled, and let the breeze carry away the old ache that had lived in my chest for years. When I got home, I locked the door. Not out of fear, but love. Love for the woman who finally remembered her worth. People think motherhood means endless sacrifice, but being a mother doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. You can love deeply and still say no. You can forgive and still walk away. As I looked around my quiet home, sunlight sliding across the floorboards, I whispered the same words I'd thought the day Marcus appeared at my door. This time, I finally did what I should have done years ago. And for the first time in my life, I meant it.